the morning after. And a very interesting reaction from things yesterday. The Springboks being outplayed or rather outconverted by the All Blacks yesterday, and a bit of a crash into reality for a lot of us Bok fans. And I think, to be fair, I think we've known that there have been a couple of worrying signs recently, but yesterday was very frustrating because it was a game where we got outplayed for 30 minutes and a game where we could have won. And it's obviously a very coulda, shoulda, woulda situation. But the reality is, yesterday we saw us not being able to convert dominance into points. And the All Blacks did the complete opposite, where as soon as they got a sniff, they took it. And the bot conversion rate came back to bite us. So what we've done is got a complete new stat pack. And if you are part of the Forever Sports Members Club, it is now officially on the Members Hub. If you would like to get access to the full presentation, a full statistical breakdown of exactly where the game was won, lost, we'll show you a couple of slides. Please do become a member. Link in the description. And there's a whole bunch of other benefits, including competitions, giveaways, calendar invites, and the likes of that to basically take you closer to the game than ever before. But let's get into it, shall we? Because it is a very interesting dive into the stats, which will tell a story of how South Africa had everything they needed to win the game or to win the game and didn't. I think that's the frustrating. We could have won the game. Not necessarily should have, but definitely could have. And what we're going to sort of realize now is how test matches are such fine margins. They really, really are. 1 point at halftime. The difference with the Boks is that we scored just the 3 points compared to the 21 points scored by the All Blacks in the second half. And even at halftime during the watch long, we all felt that in that scrum dominance period, if we had scored an extra 7 points and gone in 20 points to 12, things could have been a bit different in the second half. So if we then look at exactly what sort of went down and the likes of that, this is how the scoreboard moved. So you can see we kind of traded blows early on, and then it does kind of go with the dominance of inverted commas, because from about the 20th minute, even the 15th sort of minute, we did dominate things. We took things up a notch, and we were all over the All Blacks. Unfortunately, we couldn't really turn that into too much dominance, and that Fabian Holland try, for example, in the second half, those were very frustrating moments. But then over there, we saw that the shift, and it was just shortly after that immense scrum by George Bauer, where the All Blacks suddenly got into their work. If you look at where the test was won, this is what's so interesting, is the Springboks dominate a lot of the tackles. The All Blacks had to make more tackles than the Boks did, but they won more turnovers in the second half over there. Line breaks were absolutely equal, but 5 tries to 1. So you think about 7 line breaks apiece. However, the All Blacks are scoring 5 tries. The Boks are scoring 1 try. In the first half, in the first sort of 20 minutes, the Boks really, really dominated the breakdown. After that, the breakdown was a bit of a mess for the Boks, and we knew this was going to be a very important point. It was in our match pack that our members were using to watch the game ahead of this. So we knew it was going to be a potential issue, and we didn't quite get it right. This was the big talking point, isn't it? The scrum paradox. We owned the scrum for majority of the game. New Zealand didn't ever dominate the scrum. They found parity in the second half. I think that's an important point. There was that very, very important scrum penalty by George Bauer after a host of different scrum penalties and dominance by the Boks. And after that, we never really dominated a scrum. We didn't get dominated. So this New Zealand never dominated the scrum. They never had go forward ball, but they had parity. They suddenly nullified our big threat. And from there, we kind of then went, well, we don't actually have anything else to use at the moment because our backline wasn't really gelling. Even the kicking game in the first half, we were regathering a lot of those kicks, and we lost Colby, we lost Curtly Orange. Damien Williams wasn't able to get into the game as much, and all of a sudden, we kind of struggled a little bit. So that was an important point, is that once they found parity, that became a bit of a, well, now what sort of situation. And it's a massive learning curve, and it's a good time to have these kind of situations where the boss can now sit there saying, okay, cool, guys, but we're not always going to have this dominance. When we do, we need to capitalize. We probably left about 14 points out there, which, could be was very much the difference between winning and losing. But more to the point as well is we need to try and go back to finding other options. And it's a nice wake-up call at the right type of time. So, unfortunately, it's a 12-match unbeaten streak that we have lost. So that's an interesting thing. Everyone's panicking about the moment, saying, oh, this is the downfall. We'd won 12 matches in a row. Since we lost at Eden Park last year, we've not lost a test match. And I mean, a 12-match winning streak is a good streak. And it was always going to come to an end. And the frustrating thing, I think, is that a lot of Boks fans probably also just said, yeah, we know we're going to drop a test, but I think we were hoping to kind of drop it Cape Town or F&B Stadium, try and get 1-0 up at Ellis Park. If we drop 1-1-1, go back to win 2-1, try and win 3-1. Now, if you want to win the series, we've got to go 3-0 across the next 3 tests. That's very important. In terms of the All Blacks, the first time they've won in South Africa since 2022. So it was a big moment for them as well, because 2023 and beyond, they've only won 1 test. We beat them before the World Cup in what was a record victory at the time. We beat them at the World Cup. We went 2-0 when they were down here, 1-1 when we were over there, and now they've beaten us in the first test. So there's definitely been a momentum swing in the last 4 years where the Boks have dominated this clash in particular. But yesterday was definitely probably the best performance we've seen by the All Blacks against the Boks post 2023, or even before 2023, 23 and beyond. So I think it's a combination of the Boks not being necessarily at their best and this All Black side getting a lot better. But the funny thing is, I think we talk about the All Blacks are going to run the Boks off their feet, and I think that we were so embedded in this narrative that even now we are being revisionist about how the game was won. The All Blacks did not play for 80 minutes this incredibly sweeping left, right, running game the entire time. They definitely turned it up in the last 10, 15 to a certain degree. But a lot of it was the All Blacks meeting the Boks physically. There was a lot of it being, and they've got a kicking game. As I said, we all talk about, you see the Boks just kick. And now what the All Blacks are showing, they don't just kick. The All Blacks kick more than the Boks, but they kicked better. This is what we did a breakdown of against Argentina, where we said it's not about kicking, about how much you kick. It's about how well you kicked. And yesterday in the first half, we kicked well. Damian Willemse was regathering. Tezin Colby was regathering, and that was good momentum. The second half, we just didn't really manage to execute. As I said, New Zealand kicked more than Boks did, and the kick-to-pass ratio was muchness. So, and even if some people are saying, oh, well, you can't just kick a New Zealand counter. A lot of the tries weren't counter-attack tries. Fabian Holland, you think about that being a charge down. You think about Luke Jacobson coming off the back of a scrum, set piece. You look at Will Jordan. It's not a counter-attack try. There was several phases ahead of that. So it wasn't, if they had finished the counter-attack try that Damian McKenzie where Damian Willemse had that last-ditch thing, that was a counter-attack try in its purest form. But this is the thing. We can't be revisionist about it. The All Blacks didn't win with this necessarily huge, expansive game plan. They met the Boks physically in the second half, and their defense, they drew a line in the sand, and they defended phenomenally well. Jordie Barrett was phenomenal on defense. You've got to give the All Blacks credit for what they did, but you also got to make sure we are correct in giving credit for what they did and what they didn't. In many ways, the All Blacks beat the Boks at their own game yesterday, where they weathered a storm, and as soon as they had scrum parity, they then said, cool, now watch us. We can also get over the game line. We can also pitch up. And that's why players like Tupou Vai, Luke Jacobson, Jordie Barrett are so important to the All Blacks. Because there are big physical characters that can match the Boks physically. And as soon as you can do that, you start to find parity. And then it becomes a bit of a coin toss at times in terms of one-on-one. Andre Estes and Ranzo Josh Moore scores a try. Luke Jacobson gets past Peter Steph Toy, scores a try. You see, they have started to become one-on-one collisions. And it was collisions. It wasn't about one-on-one contests from a speed point of view. It was collisions. And the All Blacks started to win more collisions. I mean, the Boks had more dominant tackles, for example, and more positive gain line carries. So they still were supposedly the more physical team, but they couldn't make it count. When you think about the Jordie Barrett tackle over the line with Malcolm Marx, how important was that? So there's lots of very small details you got to get into that. And if you would like this full report, go and get onto the Members Hub. Go and check it out. Become a member of the channel. It starts at just less than 50 Rand a month. I mean, it's essentially the price of a coffee these days. And you can get a stat pack for every single game. You get preview packs. You get the analysis deck that Ronaldo will do for Rugby Unlocked this week, as well as competitions, giveaways, and the likes of that. Link in the description below. Go and get involved. Go and let us know what you think. And for the Boks, big week ahead. We'll wait to see, and we'll let you know when we're going to have a team announcement. The All Blacks will announce their team for the Lions this afternoon. And big news for the Lions, they might have 3 Springboks back in camp. And it's a good Lions side we're going to see on Tuesday. So hopefully we'll see an entertaining game. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. And we'll see you soon.